Good morning, y'all. Welcome back to the MCAT grind. Today we have Psychology Chapter 3, Learning and Memory. This takes quite a bit of portion on the psychology part due to the MCAT's favoritism towards conditionings and learning. Now, let's get right into it. For learning, we have keyword stimulus is anything we can respond to. So that can be visual stimulus or smelling stimulus, basically anything in the environment. And response is our reaction towards that stimulus. So we could be moving away or starting to do another action or motor function, anything we do as a reaction. So we have here an example of classical conditioning, which resolves or involves having a stimulus and a response. We take their relationship and then we expand it further and give it a new stimulus in order to achieve that same response. In our example here, we have a dog, and a dog naturally, due to their instinct, will salivate due to a food being present, correct? So the food itself is unconditioned stimulus because we don't need to do anything to make it a stimulus to trigger unconditioned response. So the salivation in the beginning is unconditioned because their relationship, unconditioned stimulus and unconditioned response, they happen with each other without us needing to do anything. Now, if we were to ring a bell and then present the food at the same time, the dog will then associate that bell ringing, that stimulus, with us giving food, and hence they will salivate in response to the bell ringing as well. So this bell becomes a conditioned stimulus, and their response of salivation will become a conditioned response because we have made it such that we linked this two relationships together. This isn't natural. The dogs naturally, they won't salivate due to a bell, but we made that association from a conditioned stimulus and the unconditioned stimulus together, so we can trigger the same response, the conditioned response. Now, alright, so that was classical, and that was just associating them together. Next, what we have is B.F. Skinner's operant conditioning. Oh, to refer earlier, classical, you might have heard of Pavlov's dog, so it refers to the same event. Classical conditioning with Pavlov. Next, we have operant conditioning involving B.F. Skinner, and he says that there are four types of things and responses that can happen, and you can make it happen using punishment and reinforcement in order to make a behavior happen more frequently than others. When we punish a certain behavior, that behavior will in the future get less likely. So if little Timmy puts his hand on a bunch of sand, dirty sand, and puts it in his mouth, we don't want him to do that. He would likely we don't want him to do that in the future, so we give him a type of punishment. He may not necessarily get hit, but he could get a kind of reaction that makes him a little less wanting to do that in the future. Or we could give him a negative punishment, which means taking away something good. And perhaps he won't get a certain snack for that period of time, and he will associate that, okay, doing this, grabbing dirt, put in mouth, not good. If we want to reinforce a certain behavior, such as eating his vegetables, little Timmy might get more TV watch time for positive reinforcement because we're giving him something good. And if it's negative reinforcement, we might say, oh, you don't have to do chores today because you ate your vegetables. So notice how positive and negative connotation don't mean anything. It is just mostly about the punishment or reinforcement that actually means that we want it to be more likely or less likely. Punishment in the future become less likely. Reinforcement in the future becomes more likely. Okay? Next, we have our memory. For memory, we have many divisions. We have our sensory division, which is very short. So they are only stored inside their respective lobes for a temporal amount of time. For sensory, you might see something, see a flash of colors or see a flash of numbers, and store it very quickly in your occipital lobe, and it'll go away very quickly. If you hear certain phrase like shish kebab, you'll only store that for a little bit unless you actively, consciously try to keep it in your mind. So that will only be stored in your temporal lobe because that is your hearing memory. So iconic referring to icon and visual seeing. Echoic, think about echo, you hear in your ear, so that's for your audio memory. And the sensory, so less than 1 second if you just don't pay much attention about it. It's just actively being integrated all the time. Next, we have our short-term memory, which is less than 1 minute. This is the memory you consciously actually think and integrate about. So think about working with numbers and you're asked to memorize, memorize my phone number, 604-111-1144, or something like that. And you will then quickly try to keep it in your head. You'll maybe repeat to yourself, blah, 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 blah. And generally, why phone numbers work well, because we divide it into specific chunks, and we can only work with so many numbers or items at a time, unless you practice and actively train for it, or certain geniuses or prodigies would able to memorize a lot more than others. So for example, if we're working with math procedures, we might get a couple numbers in our head and do mental math calculations, and that will be in our short-term memory into our working memory if we were to decide to manipulate the numbers or things together. Now, short-term memory is associated with the hippocampus. Remember how hippocampus in our brain part is inside your limbic system? That's right, in your forebrain, and that is where working and short-term memory are effectively stored. Your long-term memory transfers information and integrate it into a longer term. Now, long-term memory can be split into two divisions. There's explicit versus implicit. Explicit memory is your conscious memory, what you can actively think and recall, while implicit is things that just come to your mind, or just unconsciously activate. Implicit memory, think about riding a bicycle. You don't have to actively relearn it, right? And think about walking or running. They're just tasks and procedures that you do that you don't need to relearn them and actively say them out loud. However, explicit memory are declarative, meaning that they're events or facts that you actively have to say or enact out and express. So episodic memories are events that happen, perhaps, what did you do last Saturday? Or what did you do this morning? Certain events that happen to you or happen to someone else, an event that you can recall. Facts are under the semantic network. Semantic is meaning. So what fact, who is the tallest person in the world? If you know that, then you could recall and say that out loud, or how many fingers are on a person's hand. That's very easy, and you can just recall that fact and say it out loud. We have certain strategies to make memories easier for us to memorize, right? We have the peg method, so putting a list together. So I could mentally imagine there's different pegs, and for black, I want to get a carton of eggs. Orange, I want to get some milk. And blue, I want to get some cereal. Red, I want to get chocolate. So putting things down on a list. That's for PEG method. For chunking, this is what I referred to earlier, phone numbers are easier to memorize because we put them together in specific chunks, like 604 together, or blah 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 together. We have a certain split to make it easier for us to organize and recall. Self-reference is being able to make memory in association to ourselves. So if we're to associate certain words to ourselves, like, oh, maybe operant conditioning, I'll associate what I did or how I would punish myself or how I would reinforce myself. And things that can relate to yourself, you can remember a lot easier. Spaced repetition basically means don't cram. You should leave learning and all that to happening over several days and several amount of time in shorter increments. So yeah, cramming everything in a long duration over just one day will make the memory lose a lot faster. Recognition will be stronger than recall. So if you were to do multiple choice, it will be a lot easier for you to get the right information rather than having you to recall and write from memory. The same environment which you have learned in also helps you recall better. So if you were chewing a gum while learning about learning, when you do a test and you chew a gum, you might help you recall what you learned a lot better as well. So it doesn't just apply to like the same classroom or like the same place where you take the test, also to your current state or condition. We have primacy effect, which you remember the first words a lot better, and the recency effects, which you remember the last words better. So that just comes naturally, and you want to be able to strategize around that. So maybe mix up the words at different times. So if you have a list of words on Quizlet, you might want to put on shuffle mode so you learn all the words evenly. Of course, even though we learn, theirs is the process of forgetting. Our brain actively want to get out information that we deem not useful, or they just are so many things in our life that we want to filter through. In forgetting, memory decreases over time, and first sharply over the first couple of durations, and then they even out once they reach a threshold. Anterograde amnesia is forgetting new things. Retrograde amnesia is forgetting old things. Think antero, forward, retro, backward. So anterograde amnesia is your old memories interfering, so you can't remember new ones. And your retrograde amnesia is your new memories are interfering with your old memories, so you forget things that happened in the past. Alzheimer's are a result of either prions or beta pleated sheets that damage the hippocampus, and basically in older individuals they lack the ability to recall these short episodic memories, or no, explicit memories like facts and things they have to do in the next hour, but they're able to do some procedural tasks and recall certain vivid events in their past. Okay, and their also short-term memory is not as functional either. Korsakov's syndrome refers to lacking thiamine or vitamin B in their brain, and this basically leads to the anterograde and retrograde amnesia recalled earlier. So that's pretty much it for learning and memory. Good luck with MCAT grind.